Hello, today I'm reading a short story called Cranes by Hwang Sun-won. It's translated by Peter H. Lee. Just a little bit about the author. He lived from 1915 to 2000, and his homeland was Korea, and there was political turmoil going on there and affected his writing. As a small boy, he saw his father become imprisoned for political activities, and Korea was struggling against Japan, which made Korea part of its empire in 1910. Then, by the early 1940s, the Japanese had banned all writing in the Korean language, and Hwang was forced to work in secret. So after World War II, when Korea was no longer under Japan's control, communism spread through the northern part of the country, and Hwang and his family fled to the south. But they became refugees again when North Korea invaded South Korea at the beginning of the Korean War. During his youth, he was a poet, and he started writing prose, and he produced 7 novels. His country's complex history is the frequent subject of his fiction. Like in Cranes, it's set in modern times as well as the distant past. Although his work is rooted in the history and culture of his country, he also explores universal themes such as loneliness of individuals, and he is highly regarded for his insight into the hearts and the minds of his characters. The conflicts in the short story Cranes is shaped by the civil war that took place in the early 1950s in Korea. And at the end of World War II, the country was divided in half. All of this happened at around the 38th parallel. And that's close to where this story takes place. It's in a village that's very close to that 38th parallel. A lot of people died during that war in both the North and the South, and the country was devastated. And we are now, as I'm reading this, in 2025, and as of today, it is still divided into North and South Korea. Now for the short story. The northern village at the border of the 38th parallel was snugly settled under the high, bright autumn sky. One white gourd lay against another on the dirt floor of an empty farmhouse. The occasional village elders first put out their bamboo pipes before passing by, and the children too turned aside some distance off. Their faces were ridden with fear. The village as a whole showed few traces of destruction from the war, but it did not seem like the same village Sung-sim had known as a boy. At the foot of a chestnut grove on the hill behind the village, he stopped and climbed a chestnut tree. Somewhere far back in his mind, he heard the old man with a wen shout, "You bad boy, you're climbing up my chestnut tree again." The old man must have passed away, for among the village elders Sung-sim had met, the old man was not to be found. Holding the trunk of the tree, Sung-sim gazed at the blue sky for a while. Some chestnuts fell to the ground as the dry clusters opened on their own accord. So the northern village was close to the northern border of South Korea, near the 38th parallel. And then wen means a harmless skin tumor. In front of the farmhouse that had been turned into a public peace police office, a young man stood tied up. He seemed to be a stranger, so Sung-sim approached him to have a close look. He was taken aback. It was none other than his boyhood playmate, Tok-chae. Sung-sim asked the police officer who had come with him from Shantae what it was all about. The prisoner was vice chairman of Farmers Communist League and had just been flushed out of his hideout in his own house, Sung-sim learned. Sung-sim sat down on the dirt floor and lit a cigarette. Tok-chae was to be escorted to Songdang by one of the peace policemen. After a time, Sung-sim lit a new cigarette from the first and stood up. "I'll take the fellow with me." Tok-chae, his face averted, refused to look at Sung-sim. They left the village. Sung-sim kept smoking, but the tobacco had no taste. He just kept drawing in the smoke and blowing it out. Then suddenly he thought that Tok-chae too must want a puff. He thought of the days when they used to share dried gourd leaves behind walls, hidden from the adults. But today, how could he offer a cigarette to a fellow like this? Once, when they were small, he went with Tok-chae to steal some chestnuts from the grandpa with the wen. It was Sung-sam's turn to go up the tree. Suddenly, there came shouts from the old man. He slipped and fell on the ground. Sung-sam got chestnut needles all over his bottom, but he kept on running. It was only when they reached a safe place where the old man could not overtake them that he turned his bottom to Tok-chae. Plucking out those needles hurt so much that he could not keep tears from welling up in his eyes. Tok-chae produced a fistful of chestnuts from his pocket and thrust them into Song-sam's. Song-sam's threw away the cigarette he had just lit, then made up his mind not to light another one while he was escorting Tok-chae. They reached the hill pass, the hill where he and Tok-chae used to cut fodder for the cows, until Song-sam had to move near Tok-chae, south of the 38th parallel, 2 years before the liberation. Song-sam felt a sudden surge of anger in spite of himself and shouted, "So, how many have you killed?" For the first time, Tok-chae cast a quick glance at him and then turned away. "How many did you kill? You?" he asked again. Tok-chae turned toward him once again and glared. The glare grew intense and his mouth twitched. "So you managed to kill many, eh?" Song-sam felt his heart becoming clear from within, as if an obstruction had been removed. "If you were vice chairman of the Communist League, why didn't you run? You must have been lying low with a secret mission." Tok-chae did not answer. "Speak up. What was your mission?" Tok-chae kept walking. Tok-chae is hiding something, Song-sam thought. He wanted to take a good look at him, but Tok-chae would not turn his averted face. Fingering the revolver at his side, Song-ham went on, "No excuse necessary. You are sure to be shot anyway. Why don't you tell the truth here and now?" "I'm not going to make any excuses. They made me vice chairman of the league because I was one of the poorest and I was a hard-working farmer. If that constitutes a crime worthy of death, so be it. I am still what I used to be. The only thing I'm good at is digging in the soil." After a short pause, he added, "My old man is bedridden at home. He's been ill almost half a year." Tok-chae's father was a widower, a hard-working poor farmer who lived only for his son. 7 years ago, his back had given out and his skin had become diseased. "You married?" "Yes," replied Tok-chae after a while. "To whom?" "Shorty." "To Shorty? How interesting. A woman so small and plump she knew the earth's vastness, but not the sky's altitude. Such a cold fish." He and Tok-chae used to tease her and make her cry, and Tok-chae married the girl. "How many kids?" "The first is arriving this fall," she says. Song-sam had difficulty swallowing a laugh about to explode in spite of himself. Although he had asked how many kids Tok-chae had, he could not help wanting to burst into laughter at the image of her sitting down with a large stomach, one span around. But he realized this was no time to laugh or joke over such matters. "Anyway, it's strange you did not run away." "I tried to escape. They said that once the South invaded, no man would be spared. So men between 17 and 40 were forcibly taken to the North. I thought of evacuating, even if I had to carry my father on my back. But father said no. How could the farmers leave land behind when the crops were ready for harvest? He grew old on that farm, depending on me as the prop and mainstay of the family. I wanted to be with him in his last moments so that I could close his eyes with my own hands. Besides, where can farmers like us go, who know only living on the land?" Last June, Song-sam had to take refuge. At night, he had broken the news privately to his father, but his father had said the same thing. Where can a farmer go, leaving all the chores behind? So Song-sam left alone, roaming about the strange streets and villages in the South. Song-sam had been haunted by thoughts of his old parents and the young children left with all the chores. Fortunately, his family was safe then, as now. This used to be the neutralized zone along the 38th parallel. The cranes were still living here as before, while the people were all gone. Once Song-sam and Tok-chae were about 12, they had set a trap here, without the knowledge of the adults, and had caught a crane, a Tanjong crane. They had roped the crane, even its wings, and had paid daily visits, patting its neck and riding on its back. Then one day they overheard the neighbors whispering. Someone had come from Seoul with a permit from Governor General's office to catch cranes as specimens or something. Then and there, the two boys dashed off to the field. That they would be found out and punished was no longer a weighty concern. All they worried about was the fate of their crane. Without a moment's delay, still out of breath from running, they untied the crane's feet and wings. But the bird could hardly walk. It must have been worn out from being bound. The two held it up in the air. Then all of a sudden, a shot was fired. The crane fluttered its wings a couple of times and came down again. It was shot, they thought. But the next moment, as another crane from a nearby bush fluttered its wings, the boy's crane stretched its long neck with a whoop and disappeared into the sky. For a long time, the two boys could not take their eyes away from the blue sky in which their crane had soared. Hey, why don't we stop here for a crane hunt? Sung-sim spoke up suddenly. Tok-chae was puzzled, struck dumb. I'll make a trap with this rope. You flush a crane over here. Having untied Tok-chae's hands, Sung-sim had already started crawling among the weeds. Tok-chae's face turned white. You are sure to be shot anyway. These words flashed through his mind. Pretty soon a bullet would fly from where Sung-sim had gone, he thought. Some paces away, Sung-sim quickly turned toward him. Hey, how come you're standing there like you're dumb? Go flush the crane. Only then did Tok-chae catch on. He started crawling among the weeds. A couple of Tanjong cranes soared high into the clear blue autumn sky, fluttering their huge wings. So why was he urging him to flush the crane? What was he really doing? Maybe helping his friend escape? Just shows you how people on opposite sides can be so much alike, but when things happen in the world, we get divided, unfortunately. So what did you think about this story? Can you relate to it in some kind of way? Do you have a friend that you grew up with and then went your separate ways, and maybe now you're very different from each other, but maybe if you got together, you would remember a lot of things and have a lot of things still in common?